In my previous Git WorkTrees video, I shared my script to give agents true isolation with Claude Code. Anthropic recently released native Git WorkTree support that gets you nearly there. Today, I'm going to show you how to extend it to give true isolation in a Ruby on Rails application. There are 4 things you need to understand to make this work. First, what Git WorkTrees are and why agents need them. Second, what Claude Code's native WorkTree support does. Third, where it falls short for Rails, how to extend it with the WorkTreeCreate hook for true database isolation. Let's start with a quick refresher. Git WorkTrees let you check out multiple branches at the same time, each within its own directory. One working directory per branch, so you don't have to worry about stashing changes or switching branches. You have parallel work. For AI agents, this is essential. If you want to run multiple Claude Code sessions working on different features simultaneously, without isolation, they each step on each other, whether it's editing the same files and creating conflicts on the same branch. WorkTrees give each agent its own workspace. If you want a full deep dive on WorkTrees, I covered that in my previous video. I'll leave a link here. What's new is that Claude Code handles this natively now. To get started, all we need to do is call Claude-WorkTree. It takes an optional argument, which is the branch name, which it will use to create the new branch, as well as the WorkTree name. If we don't provide it, we'll get a random name generated for us, which is what we'll do here. So here we can see that the session was started, and now we have a WorkTree in the .claude/WorkTrees directory. We can see our branch name, as well as the name of the WorkTree that was created for us. If we go to the project root and run git status, we'll see that there's a new .claude/WorkTrees folder that contains our WorkTrees. By default, it's not added to the git ignore, and so I recommend that you go ahead and do that like I'm doing right here. Let's go ahead and add .claude/WorkTrees to make sure that future WorkTrees are not added to the history. Let's go ahead and commit that. Real projects have config that's excluded from Git, things like your .env file or credentials like a config master key. Git WorkTrees duplicates your tracked files, so these ignored files are missing in every new WorkTree. Claude Code has a solution for this, the .WorkTreeInclude file. It works like a git ignore, but in reverse. You list the ignored files that you want copied into the new WorkTree. Now, when I create a new WorkTree, all of those files will come along. You can bring config files over, but you can't bring over entire separate databases. The --WorkTree flag isn't the only entry point. You can also ask Claude mid-session to work in a WorkTree. You can even ask Claude to spawn subagents using a WorkTree. Then, every subagent gets their own isolation automatically. You can even define an isolation parameter for your custom agents, setting it to WorkTree. This will ensure that every time that agent is used, it's always working within a WorkTree. If you watched my first video, you saw a shell script that handled all of this: branch creation, directory setup, and cleanup. Native WorkTrees handle the same Git mechanics. They're integrated into Claude Code itself. No external script to maintain. Subagent support is even automatic. Except for one thing. Git WorkTrees give you file isolation, but they do not give you database isolation. A Rails app running in a WorkTree still points at the same development database and the same test database as your main checkout. So you can picture this: 2 agents running your test suite at the same time. One agent inserts test data. The other agent's assertions fail because the data doesn't match what it expected. Now you get flaky tests and data collisions, as well as corrupted state. True isolation for a Rails app means 3 things: a separate database per WorkTree, an environment config like credentials or .env files available on each WorkTree, and dependencies installed. This is what my original script handled, and this is what we need to bring forward into the native system. Claude Code supports lifecycle hooks, code that runs at specific moments during a session. The one we care about is WorkTreeCreate. It fires every time a WorkTree is expected to be created. Whether you ran with the WorkTree flag from the CLI, asked Claude mid-session, or an agent spawned with the isolation. Here's what's interesting about the hook. It was actually designed for teams using other version control systems other than Git, such as SVN or Mercurial. It's an extension point that lets you replace the default Git WorkTree behavior with your own. We're going to use that same extension point to bootstrap a Rails environment. The script from my previous video isn't obsolete. We're going to move that logic into this hook. Let's walk through the hook configuration and the script that it calls. First, we're going to need to update our settings. Instead of our Claude settings.json, we'll add a new hook for WorkTreeCreate. It's going to point at a shell script inside of the Claude hooks folder. When the hook fires, Claude passes JSON to standard input with the session context, the working directory, and the session ID. Our script reads that input, does the setup, and prints the path to the created work tree and standard out. That's the contract. Print the path, exit, and Claude uses that directory. Now let's look at the script itself. Let's walk through each piece. First, we're going to read the input and set up our variables. We're going to generate a branch name and pick a worktree directory. We'll use the same configuration that Claude does, putting our worktrees in .claude/worktrees based off the branch name. Next, we create the Git WorkTree and branch. We need to carry over the original behavior for Git WorkTrees and bring over anything that's included in the .worktree include file. Now, the part that the native worktrees don't necessarily handle. We're going to create a .env.local in the worktree, where we can use unique database names based off the branch name. This will override the defaults in our database.yaml and the defaults in the .env file. We'll take the branch name and transform it into something we can use in the database name. That's Postgres safe. So hyphens are going to become underscores. Each worktree now points at its own development and test database. Next, we run bin setup to bootstrap our application, setting up new databases and installing dependencies. And lastly, we're going to print out the worktree path to standard out. This tells Claude where the worktree lives and where it's going to be working in. So now let's go ahead and try out our new hook for creating a worktree. We'll go ahead and run claude-worktree to start a new worktree. If we take a look at the .env.local file, we'll see that we now have custom database names for both the development database as well as the test database. We can go ahead and run our specs, and we'll see that everything runs properly. Now we have true isolation with a complete separation, including separate databases. One thing to keep in mind, worktrees will accumulate, and so do the databases that they create. Claude Code cleans up the workspace directory when you exit a session with no changes, but the databases will stick around. You have two options. Use the WorkTreeRemove hook to drop the databases when the worktree is removed, basically mirroring the creation logic. Or run a periodic cleanup script that finds orphaned databases and drops them. I used a WorkTreeRemove hook, but in reverse. Run railsdb drop on both the development database as well as the test database. These patterns aren't Rails specific, but Rails does give us the conventions that make it easy to do. Any application with external state has this gap and can be resolved in this similar manner. Django, Phoenix, Laravel, if your app talks to a database, a cache, a queue, Git WorkTrees alone won't isolate those resources. The worktrees give you the file isolation. The hook gives you everything else. If you're trying to get Claude Code working in a real code base, not just demos, I work with engineering teams and individual developers to help set up exactly these kinds of workflows. Link is in the description if you want to talk. I also send a weekly newsletter breaking down what's actually working in AI development. No hype, just patterns from production. Links in the description. I'll also be including a link to the source for this hook in the newsletter, so stay tuned. And if you're interested in any more content like this, you can check out the playlist here. I'll see you in the next one.